I wanted to talk just a little bit about family caregiving because
Sure.
my goal had been to help families plan ahead and be proactive, with aging planning. But the reality is 92% of our families are coming to us as overwhelmed, burned out, angry, resentful caregivers, because if they weren't providing the type of service and care that their parents needed, their parents would not be able to function at home.
Hello, this is Matt Helton with OneTrust Home Loans, your reverse mortgage experts. And you found the Serving Seniors podcast, where we highlight those businesses and those individuals that help seniors not just get by, not just survive, but thrive in retirement. And today we have another one of those awesome businesses and people. We have Miss Annalee Kruger, and she's with CareRight Incorporated. Now, she's the owner, and she is a senior care consultant. And she's going to share with us the different aspects of that and how she serves seniors and helps them have better and have great retirements. Annalee, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt. And thank you for having me as your guest today.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for being here, and thanks for working this in. You just shared with us you've had multiple podcasts, multiple client conversations, and been working so hard to take care of these seniors. So thanks for all you do. And also thanks for spending time with us today. So feel free to take a drink of water if you need to.
Nope, I'm all set.
You've earned it. So, Annalee, you were just sharing with us that you are in Florida, but you work all over the country. So maybe just share a little background, who you are, what you've done in the past, and kind of your journey to get to where you are today serving seniors.
Yeah. So all I know is seniors and aging and family caregiving and dementia and end of life. It started when my grandparents in the 70s moved in with us on the farm in Iowa, because back in the 70s, we didn't have home care. We didn't have independent living or assisted living. And so their options were die at home, move in with their kids, or move into a nursing home. And so all I know is seniors. And I was a candy striper in nursing homes back when they had candy stripers, in the 80s. And so I went into social work to specifically work with geriatrics, with our aging population. And I worked as a social worker, admissions director, and ultimately as an executive director in CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities that have independent living all the way down to like skilled nursing and rehab. And so I did that for over 26 years. And every day I encountered the same predicament that families had every day. And it is this. Mom fell, she broke her hip. She's the caregiver to dad with dementia. The kids back then in the 90s all lived kind of near each other so they could help out a little bit more. But the problem was the same, is one of their parents is in the hospital, or one of their aging loved one is in the hospital. Hospital says, here's a list of facilities. Go find one by noon tomorrow because we're discharging. And that puts families in a total emotional tailspin. So they're literally coming into the care facility just wide-eyed and like deer in the headlights, because unless you hang out in the long-term care community, it's pretty intimidating. Sure. Nobody wants, it's not on anyone's bucket list to put parents in a care facility, right?
Right.
And so the kids would come in, they'd have all these brochures of the care facilities that the hospital discharge planner gave them. And they got poor dad trucking along because he's got dementia and can't be home by himself. Yeah. And so they had to take care of him while mom's in the hospital. And the kids had no idea what questions to ask during the tour, what to look for. They were just scared and overwhelmed. And they didn't understand dementia. They didn't understand assisted living is different than skilled nursing, and memory care is different than a nursing home. And they thought Medicare was going to pay for all the care that their parents needed. And so they're like, well, if dad's dementia gets worse. And so it was so clear that there was so much non-education about ignorance, because they didn't know what they didn't know. Right. And so then when I would ask the kids, well, what do your parents have in order? Do they have long-term care insurance, living wills, power of attorney? Do they have full codes, or what's their end of life? And they're like, I don't know. We've never talked about any of this. And so in 2011, after 22 years, I left corporate America to start my own CareRight Incorporated, my own family caregiver, senior care, dementia, and end of life consultancy. I went virtual right away in 2011 because by 2011, kids didn't live near each other anymore, or lived near their parents anymore. And so back then we only had Skype. And so for me to facilitate a family meeting and help them understand aging and family caregiver burnout and dementia and senior care options and the actual cost of care, I call that an aging plan. So the only way I could help them was to be virtual, because by then families lived in all different zip codes, time zones. And so the kids were like, oh, you mean I don't have to fly back and forth I was in Milwaukee at the time. And they're like, so I don't have to fly back to Milwaukee? And they're like, no, we work smarter, not harder. Wow. And so my consultancy went, it blew up really quickly right away, because no one is still to this day, no one is providing this type of consulting services to families all across the country, and this type of robust aging planning so that families can actually make informed decisions about aging in place at home, or when is it time to bring in care, or how do we get mom and dad on board with bringing in companions, or what if they can't afford to stay at home? What do we look at? What are the options after that? So,
wow, that's crazy. And this is being recorded in the winter. So I hate to say it, no one wants to go to Milwaukee, especially this time of year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To be, but no, all joking aside, that's an awesome service, just because most people have busy lives. That's why they've got a job and they've got kids, and that's why they now live in California and their parents are in Milwaukee, right? That's where their job is, and they can't just go that easy, especially if you have a lot of things tying you down. But you want to be there for mom and dad. So this is a great kind of a middle ground where you can be the liaison to help bridge that gap and figure it out for them.
That's right. And I moved to Florida in 2017 because I was like, why should I be in 20 below weather
right.
when I can be in 80-degree weather? And so I moved to Florida in 2017, right before Hurricane Irma. But the reality is, it's just, it's such a blessing to be able to help families wherever they live and wherever they are in their care decisions or family caregiving journey. I wanted to talk just a little bit about family caregiving because my goal had been to help families plan ahead and be proactive, with aging planning. But the reality is 92% of our families are coming to us as overwhelmed, burned out, angry, resentful caregivers, because if they weren't providing the type of service and care that their parents needed, their parents would not be able to function at home. The kids are basically the assisted living for their parents. And they're like, well, I can't keep taking time off work. Yeah. Or now my spouse is saying, look, you got to figure out what to do with your parents because you're not present emotionally or physically in our own family relationships. And those crisis rescue missions, if you live in New York and your parents live in Texas, it's not $69 on Frontier. So it gets very expensive very quickly. And so most families, unfortunately, because they don't know about care, right? We always are like the best kept secret, people say. And I'm like, keep spreading the word. Because I built my business solely off of word of mouth referral. Right. And so what happens though is families get thrust into caregiving. No one intends that dad's going to have a stroke, or families are in a bit of denial. They don't think that something terrible is going to happen, but one fall, one stroke, one heart attack, the primary caregiver takes ill or dies. And now you're like, oh, mom can't take care of dad anymore because she just had a stroke. Now what do we do? So ideally, people would come to us proactively when they realize, none of us are getting stronger or more able-bodied or more mobile or cognizant as we age. It only makes sense that we need to be putting a plan in place because we don't get healthier as we age.
Sure.
And I don't know any adult kid who's just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Life is busy. Right. They have their own families, their careers, their jobs, or their own health issues. And then when mom has that stroke, they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And then that's when they realize how ill prepared they were with not having documents in order, like estate plans, like power of attorney, long-term care insurance, or funeral arrangements. And now they have to make really big care decisions. And when they find out, staying at home can cost 30, 40, 50, 60,000 or more a month in just companion care, not a lot of people can afford that for too long.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's a lot to take in for somebody all at once. I guess tell me how when they find you in the burned out, overwhelmed, they can't do it anymore stage, how do you take them from that phase to like, all right, here's how I help, here's step one, and kind of make it simple for them to get a plan in place?
Yeah, so we do a done for you or done with you aging, or it's in reality, it's a crisis plan because nobody calls because things are going well.
Right.
Well, 8% of families do, but 92% of our families are onboarded in crisis. And so that's why through the course of family meetings, which now I use Zoom, we used to only use Skype, but through the course of family meetings, I'm educating families on caregiver burnout and why mom is acting the way she is because she's burned out, or why dad is acting the way he is because of dementia. Families don't understand any of that. We also do what's called a care matrix. And that's outlining, okay, you live in this location. Let's look at home care, care managers, adult daycare programs, and care facilities. And what are the costs? What are the waiting lists? So that they can understand the lay of the land. And then we can say, okay, now that you know how much care is going to cost, what is your stay at home, aging in place at home care budget? And then so that you don't break the bank trying to stay at home and now you can't financially qualify to get into a care facility. And that's where you and your company come in handy, right? Because you provide funding and lending and those types of financial resources so that helps families determine, okay, what is going to be our aging plan? Do we need to go into a care facility right away, or can we manage at home for a period of time? But knowing that many of these care communities have long waiting lists. So if it's a 6-year waiting list in your area,
Wow.
then how are we going to reverse engineer that so that you can be at home safely? Or are you going to have to move into whichever care facility has an open bed because we didn't do any planning? Or you waited until you're in crisis mode to make that phone call to me. And now it's like, well, here's what your options are now because now we're in crisis mode.
Wow. Maybe could you contrast that with working with you on that plan versus what all would they have to do if you weren't involved? If someone tries to say, well, we can do it without her, we'll just find our own place, we'll find our own caregivers, we'll find our own facility, and
Yeah.
maybe compare and contrast those.
So a couple things. When families plan ahead, it's usually when they're still getting along because they're like, hey, have you noticed that mom's not tracking when you call? So there's a black and white night and day difference between families who plan ahead because they're still getting along. Their parents can still participate in the aging plan and say, no, I want to do this or this or this, or, oh, I have a long-term care insurance policy that pays $300 a day or whatever. And parents have better care options because you're being thoughtful. When families wait until they're in crisis mode, 85% of my week is spent doing family mediation because they don't get along. Because they're like, I told you that dad's dementia was getting worse and you didn't believe me. And I've been trying to get you guys to believe me for 3 years. And, so 85% of my week is spent doing family mediation. So it's a stark difference between crisis and proactive planning. And then your parents don't have the best, or you, if you're the senior listening to this podcast, you're not going to have the best options because you didn't plan ahead and you're not on different waiting lists, or you didn't know that in your area, the home care companies aren't taking on new clients because they don't have enough staff to staff the current existing clients, right?
Wow.
And then also when families wait until they're in crisis mode, if your parents are in the ICU unit or dad's dementia has progressed to the point he can't participate anymore, now now the kids and I are just working on this aging plan because the parents are not able to participate anymore.
Okay. Wow, that's a big difference.
It is a big difference. And I can tell you the family meetings of a family who's proactive, there's laughter, there's joy, and we have a luxury of time to think through everything versus families who are in crisis. They're not getting along, they're stressed out, they're overwhelmed. They've had to take off work or their spouses are ticked off at them, so things aren't good.
And have you found is there a catalyst for the people that are proactive, like a neighbor has a problem or
so there's certain catalysts.
someone else's issues, it's like, we need to do this before we end up like XYZ.
Yes. That's usually what triggers it. Or the kids will say, look, this is your third hospital stay in a year and a half. And we just, but now they're mad, right? So that the messaging doesn't come across as loving and compassionate because now they're frustrated. But they're like, look, this is our third hospital stay. And I told you this was going to happen. And, so again, the more proactive that we can be, the better. For families who are now in crisis mode, it's astonishing to me, like how much they waited to call me, because a lot of them will say, "Yeah, I got your card from the financial advisor, or I heard you on a podcast 3 years ago, and I just kept your information." Well, now they're 3 years of burned out and angry and resentful, and Dad's 3 years more demented, or Mom's 3 years more frail, and so that's one of the mistakes I see families waiting is denial, thinking that they have more time, or that they can figure it out on their own. When you asked me that question, families they'll either do what neighbor Joe did. Well, neighbor Joe's situation is probably nothing like your situation. Chat GBT will only get you so far. And unfortunately, there's a lot of senior consultants out there who actually don't have any training or professional experience, and their expertise is because they read a stack of books and listened to some podcasts and used Chat GPT. So would you rather work with someone like that or someone who's got 30 years of seasoned experience working in care facilities, doing family mediation, who knows dementia, and you get more bang for your buck when you actually work with someone who's seasoned and knows what they're doing?
That's great. Yeah, that's great. When you were talking, I was just thinking about like in this scenario, a lot of people will start asking people questions like, well, what do you think? What do you think? And the people they're asking those questions to,
they don't know,
have no idea, or they're asking the people that have something to gain, right? It's either the facility that's trying to sell you to come on in, or the facility trying to do this, or the in-home care company. So I kind of see you as an independent third party, right? They're paying for your time, or you're paying you for your service, but you're not incentivized to pick either of the plans. Your goal is to find the best plan.
Because my job is to help families make informed decisions. So most of everything that we're doing as a team here, as a family, and working with me, is educating them so they can make smart decisions. Mm-hmm. When people do this on their own, they just make really dangerous and expensive mistakes because they don't know what they don't know. And so an example is, like, over the weekend, I helped a family. They were burned out and overwhelmed. So they went on one of those online platforms to try to find a caregiver or a nurse. And because they don't know the lingo, they think a caregiver is a nurse. And so because they were burned out, they were like ready to move this person in with their mother who has dementia. They didn't do any criminal background checks. They didn't make sure she had a valid driver's license. They didn't check with a nursing board to see if she even is a nurse. Because that's what happens when people make knee-jerk reactions because they're overwhelmed and burned out in crisis mode. They make very dangerous mistakes. And it turns out this person wasn't even a nurse, and she wouldn't even allow a criminal background check. So that already tells you she's not legit.
Right.
Or when people make mistakes because they don't want to spend money working with an actual consultant who this is their expertise, they'll use a placement company where they get their kickback or commission from a facility. So they're biased, right? So if they don't contract with certain care communities, because not all care communities take these kind of contracts, and so if they don't get paid for making these move-ins, then there's no incentive to make sure families are making informed decisions. And it's just a transaction. There's no planning. There's no grab and go binder. There's no family meetings. It's just, hey, we have Ethel. She's 88. She needs assisted living. Who has an open bed? And what are you going to pay me for a commission?
Wow.
So you have to be really careful because there's no planning. So if they move Ethel into assisted living and she runs out of money in 6 months, now what are you going to do? Because now you have to move into a Medicaid facility, and so because it's just a very broken business model. It's just a transaction. Or if Ethel gets abused in that facility because they didn't vet the facility, and now the family's calling me to basically undo what these other incompetent people or companies have done, and I can only undo so much.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, and we think about how all the things our grandparents and parents have done for us, then to in a split second to make a decision like that could put them in harm's way just doesn't really seem to make sense.
Well, for sure. And, when I ask parents, because my client's the whole family. And so when I ask mom and dad on Zoom, so I have all their little squares because they live all across the country. When I ask parents, what are your goals as you age? It's always the same thing. I want to age in place at home and I don't want to be a burden on my kids. But yet it's the adult kids who are reaching out to me because they've heard me on a podcast or they read my book or they've heard from me from other my clients send me more clients, right? And so it's all word of mouth referral. And so we just want our parents to be safe and happy and have the best quality of life. So the only way to marry those two goals, mom and dad's goals and his goals, is actually putting a plan in place. And I call that aging planning, or if we're already in crisis, like crisis management.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Yeah. When I first started doing this, I thought, my thought was, well, I'm sure that the biggest worry about a senior, right, is we know that you're closer to death today than you were yesterday. You're older. So the concern was like, oh gosh, I'm going to die soon. But it's not even close to that. That the biggest fear for a senior is actually running out of money before they die for a lot of people. And that's why we love working with folks like you, and where we come in is that we're able to show them that their largest asset that most have, which is their home equity, unfortunately, that's illiquid. You can't use that. You can't say, hey, senior care company, just charge my equity, right? It just doesn't work this way.
Yeah.
So what we come in is just show them strategies where they still own their house, could still sell their house, still be able to use the house, still pass the home on to the kids whenever they're done with it. But they can use some of their equity to pay for folks coming in, paying for this care, and not be required to have the burden of a huge monthly payment. So it just makes sense. I like to say you use your house to stay in your house. Really enjoy working with people like you because you're able to explain to people, yes, it's a viable option. There's been some changes. It's not what it used to be. There's some great solutions out there. So we love, masterminding with folks like you because you're helping them come up with the plan. But still, every single part of your plan costs money.
Right.
If you don't have long-term care insurance, or they're not a veteran, or even some of those only covering a portion of it, they have to figure out the rest of it. That's where we come in, is just kind of show them how there are ways to use some of the equity and not lose your house, keep your house, and still pass it on to the kids. So it's a great way to kind of tie it all together.
For sure. Yeah. That's what I educate professionals too. Like, we have to use a collaborative team approach. Because I'm laying out this aging plan that says, okay, this is how much it's going to cost you to age in place at home. This is how much it's going to cost you to move into a care facility. This is how much you have to have for net worth to financially qualify to get into these different care communities. Now, at least when we're being proactive, we can make smart, thoughtful decisions on how to deploy the financials, the finances that they do have, and what can they do to leverage the house to meet the goals that they have. Sure. So it's a great combination of expertise that, that's required so people can make informed decisions.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I think we've covered a lot of it. I know people probably have a lot of questions and would love to leverage your expertise. I guess if someone is thinking about this and hopefully being proactive, or unfortunately if in crisis mode, how would they reach out to you and your team, and how could they best connect with you and learn from you?
Yes, the best way is to get on my Care Right Inc. website, and you can click the box to schedule a consult, or you can click the link to email us directly, and either way, you can get scheduled for a free 30-minute consult. I get the overview of what your situation is, and then I go over what my services are. I have services and solutions for literally every budget. It just depends on where they are in their decision-making journey and what they have for a budget. But if they can't afford $20 even for the invisible patient, the emotional, financial, and physical toll on family caregivers, you've got to be somewhat invested in your outcomes. So if they are, then I can help them.
That is awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll add owner and published author on top of your title.
And thank you. And it's actually, I am an actual author, like a legit author. It's not like AI. This took me months to write it, from like midnight until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for several months. And it's mostly like checklists and bullet points. So it's a fast read, because I know most people are in crisis and they just need to be like, okay, I need this chapter, and what do we need to know? So it can be a good starting point or a conversation starter for families, and say, look, mom and dad, I heard this podcast, because that's usually a question, is how do we get mom and dad on board with this? Mm-hmm. Mom and dad, you want to have a say in what happens to you as you age and where you live and where you get care. You can leverage this podcast. I heard this topic on this podcast, and it got me to thinking that we haven't really had these conversations about the what whens of aging, or how are we going to pay for care. Then you reach out to Matt, and you can leverage this and say, let's schedule a 30-minute consult. It doesn't cost anything to at least get on the calendar and hear what she has to say.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, please, if you're watching this and you're in any of those situations, please reach out to her and our team, because she would love to help. She would love to help. And thank you for really being the person that you are, and taking your expertise and not just sitting on it, but sharing it with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing all that you do as well, Matt.
Well, thank you. And thank you for watching the Serving Senior podcast, where we highlight awesome people like Annalee that serve seniors and help them thrive and improve their retirements. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.
Hey, this is Matt Helton with OneTrust Home Loans, home of retirement mortgage solutions. And we really do appreciate you checking out the Serving Seniors podcast today. Now, please go to the description down in the body of the podcast, where you can subscribe to get future shows. Please click that notification button so you get notified when other shows drop. And also, if you can go to servingseniourspodcast.com, and we'd love to hear a comment about our show. We have a heart to serve seniors, and we have a heart to make sure seniors don't just survive retirement, don't just get by in retirement. We want to show seniors how to thrive in retirement. So if you know of anyone that's 55 and older that could use some extra cash flow, maybe the retirement's not going the way that they like, our retirement mortgage solutions are designed for folks, and depending on the state, they're either 55 or 62 and older, to make sure that they have that kind of retirement that they want. As long as they own a home and they're in a good equity position, there could be some solutions that they may not have thought about, or maybe they've thought of and they just didn't know how they work. That's what we do. So anyone in that age group that could use some mortgage advice, my team and I would love to be able to help them. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you on the next show. Have a great day.